welcome to our podcast, Dr. Diaries Adventures to Ireland. I'm your host, Graham. The aim of this podcast is to showcase doctors' relocation journeys to Ireland. So whether you're a doctor interested in the move or just curious about life in Ireland, this is the podcast for you. Now, let's get into today's episode. Hello and welcome to our latest episode of Dr. Diaries Adventures to Ireland. Today we're joined by Bronwyn. Bronwyn, thanks so much for taking part in our podcast. Tell us a little bit about you.
Yeah, so I was born in Johannesburg, South Africa, and lived there right up for the rest of time up until I moved to Ireland. So I went to school there. I studied at the University of the Witwatersrand. I did my medical degree there. And then I completed my internship at Leratong Hospital, which is in Krugersdorp, South Africa. I did.
That's when your Irish journey began, right? Which is quite an unusual turn that not many other Safas take. Talk us through that. So bring us back to that time you and I connected and this whole Irish journey began.
Yeah, so it kind of started as a bit of a necessity. I had not been given a role for my community service year, and we kind of looked at it a little bit, applied, and then I got given a role, so we forgot about it. And then my husband actually got a job here, and I thought, well, let's just go for it. We like the idea of Ireland, we like the idea of trying something new. So I moved over here, was still in the process of getting my medical registration done. And just before we moved over COVID...
It was the height of COVID, right?
It was the height of COVID.
What a wild time to make such a move.
Our flights were confirmed the day before we left. It was mad.
Okay.
Yeah, we had to get dropped off at an international school, and we had a bus to the airport with a police escort. It was wild, but it was interesting. It was interesting.
Then, were you one of the unfortunate few that had the quarantine for 2 weeks when you got here?
We just missed it by about a week, thankfully. So we were in an Airbnb for a while.
God, yeah, very lucky. Yeah. I know of some who brought across boxes of wine and games consoles to get them through the crazy time of being locked away in a hotel room for those 2 weeks of quarantine. So somehow you managed to dodge that bullet.
Just a little bit, yeah. And then because everything was delayed, I actually didn't work. So we arrived in August 2020. I didn't work then until January 21 with some delays in registration. And then it was yourself who actually got me my first role here, which was exciting.
And that was, remind me again, it was Connolly Hospital, right? It was your first stop on your Irish journey.
That's at the emergency department in Connolly Hospital in Block.
Yeah, and at the time, a mini South Africa with all the other SAFAs that were in that emergency department.
Oh my goodness, there were, let me see, 6 of us at that point.
Yeah.
All South African, yeah. And it's quite the pattern. It seems there's a lot of South African doctors, particularly in the emergency departments around here. It's not hard to bump into someone.
Yeah. And that's it, yeah. Despite how big South Africa is, there's always going to be someone that you know that knows someone else, perhaps back home, and you have that common link. So, and just for people listening, in terms of your own journey to that stage in this whole process, you a European passport, of course. You, as I said, you just completed your internship.
I had a South African passport.
South African, yes, of course. So South African passport, but you came in on your partner's permit, right?
On my partner's visa, yeah. So he was on a critical skills visa, which meant that I got a stamp 1G, which is like a spousal general visa, which meant that I could work without a work permit, which was fantastic, because it meant that if I wanted a job in a hospital, they didn't have to apply for a work permit for me. Which was quite a big draw for some of them, I think. And it was much easier then for me to actually just start in a role. And it's served me well since then. So at the minute, I'm still on the same permit My husband's now on permanent residency and he'll be applying for citizenship soon. So things are moving along.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, going back to that time, why I say that your pathway is unique. Not many South Africans come here straight after internship, because if I'm right in saying, completing your community service is to some degree a bit of a requirement if you do end up deciding to return to the SA. But yourself and your husband have decided your minds are made up, and Ireland is where
Dream.
you're headed for good. Would you, in hindsight, would you encourage others to do the same, given the lengths perhaps we had to go to get your first job here? Would you recommend someone who's just off internship to do the same, or to stick it out in ComServe if possible?
I think I think any experience that you can get is great. And particularly coming from South Africa, where
Yeah,
things are very hands on, it's very clinically orientated, you'd get a lot more experience actually doing procedures. That extra year of experience is going to stand you in good stead coming here, where things are a lot more regulated. So you might not get as much hands
sure.
on exposure. Um, that being said, I don't think I was disadvantaged in any way coming in after internship. Because of the way the medical system works here, roles are very clearly defined. So even having
Yeah,
done the 2 years of internship, I already have a broader knowledge base than a lot of the people who've done the internships here, which is only a year. So even just
sure.
having done my undergraduate and my internship, it's already put me a step ahead. I would say if you're sure about it and if you're not on the fence about whether or not you'd want to go back to South Africa, it's the only country I can comment on really. But if you're not on the fence about whether or not you'd want to go back, jump in and do it. It's
Yeah,
an
and
adventure.
that's the big thing to be mindful of, isn't it? That if your mind's made up that you're not going back, do it. If you want to
Yeah,
keep that door open, do your ComServe. It's just another year,
exactly.
as you say. But it's good to have those options available there. So we're in now in Connolly Hospital in Blanchardstown in the emergency medicine department. Talk us through our comparisons, let's say, to what you're used to back in South Africa versus what you'd seen.
I think the biggest difference was the type of presentation that you'd be seeing. So in South Africa, in casualty,
Yeah.
it would be a lot of trauma and a lot of particularly violent interpersonal trauma. There's still a tiny bit of it here, but nowhere near as much. So most of the trauma you'd see would be some car accidents, and maybe someone fell off a ladder in the attic, something like that. The rest of it is
Okay.
more medical presentations, and the population is, especially in that area, it's very demographic dependent. But there, it was a significant number of older people as well, which I hadn't had much exposure
Okay.
to. So that was different, but the working environment is also much more supported. You always had a senior registrar around, or another registrar. The consultant was always available to call, which was very seldom the case back home. The interns and the senior house officers, which is the role that I went in at, very, very well supported, lots of supervision if you need it, and you never felt like you were just left on your own. It's also very different in terms of getting reviews done quickly. So within 6 hours, you're expected to refer a patient, and then the specialist team is expected to come and review them. So that immediate support from a specialist team is also brilliant. And if there was a resuscitation, you'd have anesthetics and ICU coming down, which would never happen back home. So it's that
Sure.
kind of support
Okay.
and the improved outcomes that come with it is phenomenal to see.
You've done about a couple of key differences there. I know when you mentioned sort of a bit more red tape and regulation here in Ireland versus back home in SA. You can see the pros and cons of both, can't you? Back in SA, as I say, you can get your hands stuck in and you can get a lot of exposure, but there wouldn't be as much support perhaps, there wouldn't be as much specialist collaboration perhaps, depending
Mm.
on the need of the patient. Ultimately, as you mentioned there rightly, improved patient outcomes is one of the bigger differences, and where all those differences come together, and that being the main thing, making sure that the patient outcomes are improved, and patient flow, particularly within a busy Dublin emergency medicine environment, patient flow is as efficient as you possibly can, depending on the day. I'm
Yes.
sure no doubt about some busy days there too. So that's your time in emergency economy. Moving on from there, take us through to your next post following that job in
Yeah,
Family
so
Hospital.
it was around about that time that I decided that I was interested in doing the general practice specialisation scheme. So I thought that it would
Yeah.
be a good idea to get some psychiatry experience. So I did 6 months in what they call liaison psychiatry. So my role was to work with a team of other non-consultant hospital doctors under a consultant and some nurse specialists. And we would see patients who came into the emergency department with acute mental illness or who were in crisis, and come up with a management plan for them from there. And we would also then go to the wards to see patients who had a history of mental illness and were on, say, antibiotics that would interact with their lithium or something like that. Or patients who'd been admitted to the ward for workup that turned out to have a mental illness. Different environment to be in, but really great experience.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, and like you say, the combination of emergency and psychiatry was a great foundation for you to work towards where your ultimate goal was to get into family medicine. So, dare I say, best will we jump to present day and where you're currently at? You applied to the training scheme in family medicine and you've now just recently started.
I did. I'm in my second week, which has been amazing. So I had to
Amazing.
relocate.
How is it? Like, it's a very aspirational place for a lot of doctors to get to, Bronwyn, which is why I think your story is really impactful, because that's why a lot of South Africans move here. Perhaps they're blocked out of training opportunities in SA, and they hear perhaps there aren't as many opportunities for international medical graduates here in Ireland. But you've
Mm,
defied that theory, and you, as a South African passport holder, are now on
yeah.
the family medicine training program. Can you give any sort of pointers on how that came about, how you got onto that, and any maybe advice to anyone listening who's hoping to go that same path?
I think if you try and build your foundation and your experience around it, that helps a lot. So kind of getting a broader base that would suit, like in my case, a general practitioner is a great idea. If you're wanting to do, say, the anesthetics, or try get into anesthetics from the start, or try get into an emergency medicine post from the start. Um, Papers and publishing is always a good way to go. Now, I didn't do that myself, but it does help. And just keep trying. I got it on my second attempt, but if you
Okay.
keep at it, you'll hone
What did
it.
you do differently?
So the first time I applied, I actually did get through, and then on scheme selection, we just bought a house in Dublin, and I was determined to stay there. So I only put down the Dublin schemes, and they then said, "Well, we don't have the
Okay.
space for you in Dublin." So I wasn't prepared to move at that point. So I reapplied for the next year and then put down everywhere, which was then
Yeah.
how I ended up in Sligo on the west coast.
Good. Okay. A big move, and I'm being a Dublin man myself. It is a big move coming from the capital city to out west by Sligo. How have you adapted to country living?
It's so different, but it's amazing. Where I'm staying at the minute, I look out my window and there's sheep and cows in my backyard. So it is quite different,
Yeah.
but but it's been amazing. The people are friendly and welcoming, and the hospital HR has been phenomenal. They even sent out a little booklet with information on schools and dentists in the area. I've never had that experience before, and it's there's
Very good.
mountains next to the sea. It's incredible. It really is.
Yeah. You've got Sleeve Russell, somewhere in your midst, I think. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. And 10 minutes away from the Devil's Chimney, which is the tallest waterfall in Ireland. Lovely walk to go up to Ben Bulben. The forest walk is right by us, and then the town itself still has, it's a big enough town now. So there's still cinemas and all the shops, and there's lots
Yeah.
of pubs and things going on the weekends. So it's a really kind of best of both worlds situation.
Sure. Okay. So your training program, then you're in hospital settings for a portion of it. Your first portion of that is, as say, in Sligo Regional Hospital. What department are you in for your first stretch of your training program?
I'm in psychiatry for the first 4 months. So slightly different from before. I'm in community
Yeah.
now. So it's more clinic based and then in the inpatient unit. But again, everyone's been so welcoming and so supportive. It's been great. So we do, in Sligo, we do 4 months rotations. So I'm here now for 4 months and then I'll be back in the emergency department for 4 months.
Okay. Back
Yeah.
to your roots, where it all began.
Yeah, yeah. So it's 2 years in hospital, rotating through different departments. You have to do pediatrics, you have to do medicine, one or two others, and then you do 2 years in supervised GP practices. So you have a GP trainer allocated to you, and you're seeing patients, but they kind of just keep an eye on you and check in on what you're doing. And then once a week, we have what they call a day release. So we meet up with all the other GP trainees in your year, and you'd have tutorials or case studies or discussions that are specific to GP practice just to keep you focused, really.
Okay. Brilliant. And connected with the rest of the trainees. So in
Yes.
4 years' time, which isn't that long from now, you're here nearly 4 years. So in 4 years' time, you'll be a specialist trained general practitioner.
That's it. And from there, it opens up so many
Yeah.
options.
Could you have thought you'd be in this place, Bronwyn, in your first day in Ireland? Could you have thought this would be the pathway you're on?
Not at all. I think if you told me I'd be sitting on the West Coast doing this, I think I would have looked at you and laughed. But it's funny, life has a way of turning out the way it needs to.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think probably a big takeaway there would be, like you did the second time you applied, keep an open mind.
Yeah.
You ultimately, you did want to get onto the GP training scheme. You had to take a few different steps to get there. I had to move across the country to get a little bit closer to where you want to be. But like we said, in 4 short years' time, you're going to be a specialist trained GP. And who knows, opening up your own practice could be your not so distant future too. So a lot ahead of you. So great to be able to get that pathway shared with others who might be thinking of a similar route to yourself.
Yeah, yeah. It's not a
Yeah.
it's not a quick journey. It's not necessarily an easy journey, but it has been so worth it.
Very good. Well, look, that's the whole job piece. We might then fly into a few quick-fire questions to sort of test how ingrained you are into Irish culture. Tell us, firstly, where's your favourite place to visit in Ireland?
Oh, that's got to be the Burren. I love the Burren.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So the
Tell us
limestone against
more.
the green grass, and then you've got the ocean nearby. So that's just south of that Galway area. It's stunning, absolutely stunning.
Yeah, amazing place to visit. Whatever the weather, it always manages to capture our senses. Following this, then we'll fly into your favorite Irish celebrity. Who is it that you've been drawn to since you moved here?
You're going to make me give away my age here, um, but the celebrities that I was most pleased to find out were Irish was actually Westlife. I didn't realize they were Irish until I moved here,
Okay,
and I'm now in the West.
no way. Where did you think they were from?
I
You
just
had to be.
assumed the US like everyone
Yeah.
else. But
And have you gone to see them in concert since you've been here?
I haven't. They did come out, but I was working. So it's
Okay.
fine. Next time, I'm sure they'll be around. Um, but I
Yeah.
think current celebrity would probably be Hosier. Um, he's also
Yeah.
near Dublin as
Very
well.
good.
So
Okay, so you've got a musical ear.
yeah, not big into films and that. So
Good.
music would more be
Okay. And we might then move then on to your favorite Irish slang or phrase that when you first heard, you thought like, what the hell are these people talking about?
I think I think for me it was probably your grand. So I I'll tell you a little bit of a funny story. I ended up I'd been here for 3 weeks. I was just out of quarantine, and I actually ended up. It was a wet day. I slipped down the steps on the bus. That they had to call an ambulance to get me taken off the bus in an ambulance. And I kept apologizing to the bus driver for causing an inconvenience. And he kept telling me, no, you're grand, you're grand, you're grand. And I looked at this man and I thought, I'm not grand. I'm in pain. Why are you telling me I'm grand? It was only later that I realized it's kind of the way of saying, oh, no, it's fine. Don't worry, it's fine. You're not causing a problem. You're grand.
Your grand, yeah, that's a common one that stumps a lot of people wherever they're coming from. Grand. And have you found yourself using that in your day to day life now?
A bit, yes. Although my favorite
Yeah.
one that I've probably adopted more would be, well, I'll let you go now.
Very
You,
good.
you know,
And I wonder, can you share a South African slang that you'd like to bring across here to Ireland that you may not hear from Irish people too often?
oh, there's a good few. I think probably the one that would be most useful would be the South African concept of time. So
Okay.
now, just now doesn't really exist here. So you kind of have to give actual
Yeah.
time frames, whereas we would say, oh no, I'll be there just now. Yeah, I'll be there in 10, 15, 20 minutes. Or I'll be there now, I'll be there in an hour or 2 hours. But you don't have to commit to an actual time
Right.
frame, which is quite handy. And everyone just knows what you
Okay.
mean.
Yeah. So is there? I'm trying to wrap my head around now. Now, is there times when you're left just waiting because someone said they'll be there now?
Yes, there would be, but generally it's not for something urgent. So, um, won't you take the
Okay.
bins out? Yeah, I'll do it now. Or the dishwasher needs unpacking. I'll do it now.
Okay.
Or Granny needs a phone call. She wants to know when you're coming for tea. I'll phone her just now. You know, generally
Okay.
it would be, or it's
Yeah. I
around the
might.
corner. I'll be there just now.
Might try use that one myself. And last one for you. Of course, you've been here for quite a while. No doubt you still have those home comforts that you either ask family to bring across with them when they're visiting, or you've have it on your Amazon your basket on a regular basis. What is that home comfort that you always go to just remind you of SA?
Mrs. Ball's chutney.
Okay.
It's a fruit chutney. Normally it's made from peaches, but it's iconic. And fortunately, I have found there's an Asian and African store that was I found in Dublin that sells it. So I would buy it from there. And then when my family comes over, I'd ask them to bring the crisps that are flavored like that with them. So normally they
Okay.
arrive with a shoebox full of crisps for me.
Wow. All the way from SA. And I don't know, have you been visited? There's a famous South African shop in Douglas and Cork where, by all accounts, they're stocked up with all the South African treats. Have you ventured down south yet?
I've been down south. I've been through Cork, but I actually haven't been to the South African shop. I'll have to find it on my next visit.
Stick it on your road trip list for the
Yeah,
next trip down to Cork.
definitely.
Very good. And I guess we've talked about career similarities between here and SA in terms of differences, I guess, between life here in Ireland and SA. The obvious ones having to put petrol into your own car, packing your own groceries, and a postal service that works. Those are
Yes.
some of the big differences that a lot of other staffers share. What have you found, if there was to be any one that comes to mind in terms of similarities between Irish and South African cultures that you've noticed since you've been here?
Similarities. I think, you know, both cultures would be very big on family. They're very family
Yeah.
orientated. very much look after your own, which is, I think the best way to go about it, really. And I think, especially coming in as an immigrant and not having your physical family around, having that culture here means that when we have made friends here, they've kind of adopted us, which is great.
Okay.
And that sense of community is fantastic. It really is.
Yeah. That's amazing. Amazing to hear, and again, that feeling, someone coming brand new in the country, that they get that not just from other Safas who are here, but other people that they're interacting with on a daily basis, both in work
Yeah.
and outside of work. So nice to hear that. Thanks for sharing that. If you were to give someone else listening to this one piece of advice about the overall move, what would that be?
I think it would be to just commit to it. Really, you've got to dive in with both feet. It is stressful. There's a lot of new things. There's a lot of change, a lot to get used to. But the more you just get in there, and the more you go exploring and you meet people and you allow yourself to settle, the easier time and the more fun you're going to have. There is so much to see out here. There is so much to do. Things that we'd have to pay for in South Africa, you don't pay for here, things like water and museums and things like that. So you just have to really allow yourself to kind of soak in the culture, soak in the environment, and just have fun with it.
Yeah. I love that. That's brilliant. Just keeping an open mind and just, I'd say, throw yourself into it. One
Yeah.
final thing before we finish up today, Bronwyn. What's the best part of your life now here in Ireland?
I think, especially coming from Johannesburg and the background that I have, the sense of personal safety and security for myself and my family has been
Yeah.
so freeing. We didn't even realize the way we were living wasn't normal until we came here, and we spoke to people who've never been to South Africa. As a woman, I can drive home after shift at 2 o'clock in the morning and not feel unsafe. I can go for walks on the park on my day off, and I do, and I love it. Even when the weather's miserable, you just put on a raincoat and you go. And having that freedom and that flexibility to just live your life without fear, it's priceless. Absolutely priceless. And I would do it all over again just for that.
That's incredible. Thanks so much for sharing your story, Bronwyn. I know even if there's one person who can relate to that piece, it's definitely worthwhile. So thanks again for joining us on the Dr. Diaries podcast.
It's an absolute pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Talk soon. Thanks for listening to this week's episode. If you like what you heard today, please follow wherever you get your podcasts. Want to kickstart your relocation journey? Reach out to the team on our socials at Matchmates.